And there's what, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 12 of us here. I guarantee you that collectively y'all know far more about Job with 4 weeks of instruction under your belt than I do. So you feel free to comment, say anything that you want to as far as that goes, because I am just filling in, and you know how it goes when you're the substitute. You're not much is expected of you, right? That's what I'm going with anyway. The patriarch states all people face the same challenges. Let's go ahead and read this. Anybody that's there, go ahead. Not all at once, so the volume is too heavy.
22 through 24.
22 through 24 is made. Chapter 9, I believe.
It is only one thing, therefore I say, he destroys the blameless and the wicked. If the scourge slays suddenly, he laughs in flight of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who else could it be?
Okay, all of us are going through the same situation. Now, I have different notes than you guys do, so how many subpoints do y'all have? Through F and then 5 scripture references? No?
D and
Okay. Do y'all have the patriarch states all people face the same challenges?
Yes.
Okay, how about regardless of spiritual stature? The wicked and righteous must suffer from the same inconsistencies of nature. Do I have that? What's that talking about? Storms and such like. People get swept away, whether they're Christians or not, whether they're people of God or not. We're subject to the same laws. It says those consequences, subpoint D, are identical for the innocent as well as the guilty. Sometimes that doesn't seem fair. Sometimes we look at that and but we are in a world that God has since the fall, things have changed, weather patterns have changed, and I don't know about y'all, but to me it's been kind of a frisky spring, hasn't it? I think it's still March. The wind's been blowing about 30 miles an hour consistently now for about 3 months. I'm like, what's the deal? It's not warming up, but that just happens, right? What do y'all think about all this global warming? Isn't that great? I was just watching a thing with talking about a fella. They want to spend like $50 trillion over the next 50 years to reduce our carbon footprint, of the United States, and that could be a great thing, But if India and Russia and everybody else in the world don't get on board, what's that going to do to the overall aspect of whatever's happening to the earth? How long is the earth going to be here? Until God's done with it, right? God's put us here. God's built the earth. What He built it for? Us to live on. And just like people can say what they want to about marriage, that it's old-fashioned, that it's going to go away, that it's doomed. Jesus said that in the last day, when He comes back, what's still going to be going on? People are going to be getting married, aren't they? Yeah. So that's not something that's going to go away. Poverty's not going to go away. We know that. Why is that? Jesus said, the poor you have with you, what?
Always.
Always. That's exactly right. And so we can have war and poverty and all this other stuff, but that's just the nature of people. And talking about suffering, Job, the whole book, and y'all know this as well as I do, I think Job was written for Ron Gilbert. I really do. Because no matter where I find myself, you can look at Job and what he went through, and it just seems like Job kind of went through a whole lot of stuff that kind of makes me kind of feel sad that I can have pity parties over the little trivial things that I go through when a man has gone through so much. And if we can get through it, or to it tonight, the fact that you've got people talking about his children and they got kind of what they deserved, and boy, that's got to hurt. That's got to hurt, and you talking about the dead, and then you're talking about his family, talking about his children and the things that he has to go through and does go through. And the whole time he doesn't understand it. He's arguing this out in his mind, and of course we know how it ends. But he just wants an audience, doesn't he? He wants to be able to talk to God. He wants to say, why is this happening to me? And so many folks have looked at this same problem. We call it the problem of evil. There's entire classes, philosophies, that I've studied this a lot in my time. And, what is it? C.S. Lewis says that God that speaks to us in nature, but he hollers at us in our pain. You want to get somebody's attention. Sometimes, pain is something that it just stops you. You may think you got your day planned out. You may have your week planned out. You got plans, you got things that need to be done, and all of a sudden you have a heart attack, or you have a stroke, or just a whole a lot of it, just about any disease you can think of happens. Guess what? Everything's put on the back burner. Everything's put on hold, and now you start thinking about the smaller things. I've got to preach a funeral tomorrow for a lady. I didn't know her, but one of her daughters is a member there at Trenton. By the way, I'm at Trenton now, Trenton, Georgia. I was at South Pittsburgh last time I was here. Made that move back in August, so that's where I'm at now. If you're ever going through there, you just holler. I live right beside the freeway. I can run you out a bottle of water or something if you need something. But we all go through these things, and appreciate Job. He wants to talk to God. He wants to, give his, why is this happening to me? And it's one of the few times that the curtain's pulled back, and that we can see what's actually going on. And it's not God behind this at all, right? It's the devil. But we have a tendency to want to blame God and to be upset with God, when in reality, God has got the harness. He's pulling the reins back on the devil, who would just keep on going and do everything he could to ruin Job's life even more, even kill Job if he possibly could. F there, notice there were present at that season some that told him of the Galileans. And so Jesus just asked them, do you think these folks were more wicked than anybody else? Do y'all have that on your notes? Okay. This is Jesus talking about the Galileans, and apparently some of them had been offering up sacrifices, and the governor, Pilate, was upset with them for some reason. And so when he killed them, had them slain, he used their blood as well as what they were offering. And so Jesus asked him, says, do you think that they were more wicked than everybody else? Because we have a tendency to think that, don't we? When we see some great tragedy happen somewhere, do you remember when Katrina came through New Orleans? Do you remember all the televangelists and stuff? What were they saying about it? Remember that?
End of the world.
Do what?
End of the world.
Well, they were talking about, but New Orleans in particular, they deserved it, right?
Yeah.
And then, it's because Sin City, if you will, or whatever. Well, all places where you have a bunch of men are wicked, right? Nothing changed with that. Me and Peter were talking on the way over here. Chattanooga is one of the most crime-ridden, violent places in all of America. And that's just hard to believe, isn't it?
It has been for years.
Chattanooga, yeah. And
I remember one time we were going to work back in the early 50s. I was just a kid. I was with Dad, and the guy on WDXP radio said, the national survey shows that Chattanooga is number 3 in crime in the cities in the South. He said, we ought to be ashamed of that. So we ought to be number 1.
that's exactly right. I can't believe when that's somebody else looked at that. DXB?
Yeah.
Was that a country channel?
Yeah.
Okay, because you said that call sign, and I was going like, I
It was
remember
at the
that.
Loan Building, George Avenue.
Okay. Because I grew up, when I was younger, Jet Fly, remember that? And WGOW? And, well, I don't know how we got on that, but baby, that was a pretty good thing. Remember old Tommy Jet cruising around in that Chrysler with a big spoiler on it, and a bullhorn on the back playing the radio through it? Oh, that's pretty neat.
You know, Jim Durbin's cousin.
Are you serious? Are you kidding me?
No.
Man, is this a small world or what? Jim Dearman, that's something else. Well, Jesus is just asking, do you think that this happened to them because they're more evil than? No, that's not the case at all. And he says, and I tell you nay, except you repent, you shall all likewise perish. And so, all of us in our lives will find ourselves going through different things. And trials, and we pray for one another, but there's nothing, there is no temptation overcoming you or taking you, but such as is what? Common demand. Common demand. Yeah, but when we're going through those trials, God is faithful and He will give us a way, a means of escape from that temptation or that trial. So you can be in situations where you think it's just all about you and that you're being punished. And brother, we've all been there. I've been there. My wife she's had 3 types of cancer, and after her bout with the second type, I remember just being ticked off, you know. It was Christmas Eve, and no, it was that day after Christmas, I'm sorry. It was that Christmas tree. We were up at Erlanger, and the Christmas tree was out on the roof. That's how high our room was. And I was just kind of upset about the whole situation, you know. And I'm thinking, you know, breast cancer, all this other stuff. And then it dawned on me again. I have to remind myself, you know, Stephanie had ovarian cancer when she was 19. And 50 years earlier, she'd have died. She had breast cancer when, back in 2000, I think it was. And usually they didn't even screen for such things. You know, I mean, people just didn't. And I thought, you know, I'm actually so blessed. But it's all about perspective, and it's all about how you're looking at it. And we can get upset with God. Sometimes we get upset with not so much God, just life situations. But has it promised that this life was going to be gravy? Now, I don't know if we'll get to Job 14, but he tells us, man, that is born of woman is what?
A few days.
Yeah, we don't hear very long. You know, most of us in this room have probably been around, well, a couple of you not, but most of us have been here, you know, we're doing pretty good. You know, when the Spanish found or went and landed at St. Augustine, the average age of a Spaniard when he died was 41 years old. That's the life expectancy of somebody from Spain in 1506 or whatever it was. Do you know the Seminoles were living to be 90? They also averaged about 6'1" for their males, and the Spanish people were about 4'10". So who improved whose life when they got here, right? Yeah, I bet you. But we all go through the same thing. We're here for a short time, and then and so what does that tell us? You know, I love the Ecclesiastes letter, you know, fear God and keep His commandments. That's so, but during this whole thing, you know, Job's friends, and you know this better than I do, have not been very good comforters, right? As a matter of fact, they were doing great until they started talking. And it's amazing to me how, to the man, they are after Job, you know? They're just like, look, dude, you've brought all this on yourself. And notice the beginning in verse 25, he says, my days are swifter than a post, they flee away, they see no good, they pass away as swift ships, as the eagle that hasteth to prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, I leave off my heaviness and comfort myself. I'm afraid of all my sorrows, and I know that will not hold me innocent. If I be wicked, then why then labor I in vain? If I wash myself with snow water, I'll make my hands never so clean. Yet thou shalt plunge me in the ditch, and mine own clothes shall abhor me. For he is not a man as I am, talking about God, that I should answer him, and we should come together in judgment. Neither is there any daysman betwixt us. Job understands his days are passing swiftly. We all do. That had to be such a, you know, a man in his position in life, 10 children, to have all the possessions that he had. You know, most of us, I shouldn't say most of us, I, in my life, kind of realized that I'm on the back end of it. You know, I'd say I'm probably 3/4 done, if you will. And that's if the Lord sees fit to allow me to have it to get up to 80, you know. But most of it's gone. And I imagine that's where Job probably was thinking. He's got 10 kids, and, you know, can't wait to see the grandkids and maybe see the great-grandkids and kind of, you know, just ease on out of here. But sometimes that's not the way it's meant to go, is it? Sometimes we're just not going to ease on out. Sometimes there's a lot more work to be done. And so thankful for aged members of the Lord's church, because so much of the time they have time to give. They usually have more means by which to give because they've been good stewards of their lives. They're in a better monetary position than a lot of the younger folks. And so a lot of us think we've got this thing planned out. We think this is about how it's going to work, and then lo and behold, that's not the way it happens. Notice he says, what is it, number B there? To Job, each day may seem interminable, but one day follows another, and soon the week and month. Do y'all feel like that? You just kind of wonder, like, where did the winter go? You know, did we even have a winter this year? Does anybody remember?
Yes.
We did have one? Okay. I don't think I ever saw any snow. I don't believe we had a couple of days, and maybe there's going to be a little. Of course, y'all live up here in the hills, don't you? Y'all probably were shoveling out by the foot. No, we just didn't have much of one, did we? Probably paid for with the bugs this year. He desires to stop his lament, to put off his complaint. He wants to put on a cheerful countenance, but he says just things are bad. It's not good. And so in point 3 there, even if you put on a cheerful facade, his friends would still count him as guilty, a facade. You know, I had no idea what a facade was. I thought we had a foundation problem. I hired a structural engineer to come over. He said, it's not your foundation, it's your facade. I was like, yeah, man, I hate that. What's a facade? He said, what's the thing you see on the outside? I'm like, oh, okay. So, and I've learned what fascia is since then, too. That's the little thing that run around the edge. But anyway, you know, it's what you put out there, what you let people see. His friends would still count him as guilty. There was no fixing it for them. You know, what was it going to take for them to realize that he wasn't guilty, that he had not done this great wickedness, and it just gets worse and worse. And of course, I think Rick made mention of that in these notes already, that they're after him now, but some of them get plumb ugly, if you will. Notice chapter 10, Job's weariness. Job understands the eternality of the soul, and he speaks to the weariness of the physical part of his existence. While this may be true, it can be also said that Job did not have as much information about the eternal nature of the soul as do we, and how all that's going to take place. We're so blessed to know how all this ends, and that the Christ and where we'll be, and so forth. And we may not know all the particulars, but we do know that there will be a last day, and in that last day, everybody who has ever been will be resurrected into a new body. We don't know exactly all the details of that body, but we know that it's sown in what's sown in corruption will be reaped in incorruption. You think about Jesus' body, that it could change form, it could walk through walls and so forth. So there's a lot of things that I'd like to know about it, but at least we know that that's what's going to take place. We know that the wicked will be lost forever. We know that the saved will be saved forever, will be with the Christ and God. Many descriptions we have in the scriptures of using the terminology that we can understand. You know, such as streets paved with gold. That's pretty neat, but we really think there's going to be streets with gold somewhere. Those are John using the language that he has in hand, trying to speak to us about things that are so marvelous, so wonderful, that they're using the best things that they can to explain it. You know, I always thought it was pretty interesting. The Apostle Paul going to heaven, what does he have to say about how heaven looked? Doesn't say a word. What does he say about heaven? You remember? What was the thing that he brought out about heaven? It's what he heard. Remember? And what did he say about what he heard? Couldn't tell us. With words which he couldn't have uttered. You know, talking about going into the heavens. And, you know, so when we think about God in the scriptures, we always talk about what does God look like. Job wants to see God, but that's a problem, isn't it? No man can see God. Why is that? John 4 verse 24, what's that, Brother G? God is a spirit. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. You can quote it. We need to know what that means. God doesn't have green eyes or brown hair. And when you do have what we call a theophany in the Bible, that's God simply approaching us in a position where we won't freak out. You know, looks like a man, talks like a man, acts like a man, but it's God, if you will. And he's doing that for our benefit, just as the Bible speaks to us accommodatively. Can you imagine what God knows? You know, the infinite God trying to keep, communicating with finite man. He's got to keep it simple. And then in even doing that, we kind of mess that up pretty good, right? Let's drop on down. The eternal part of his existence was worry of life. The eternal part. The hope of proving yet he would not charge himself with guilt, nor would he charge God foolishly. He doesn't say God's mistreating him, but what does he want to do about God? What does he want to do to God? What's the thing he keeps bringing up?
He wants to talk to him.
He wants to talk to him, doesn't he? Plead his case to see, what exactly is going on. I always thought that's what's so great about the first 10 verses, that when he gets a chance to be in the presence of God. Because immediately he's like, okay, I don't even want to do that. I don't want to do that. I thought I did. No, I'm good. I'm good. Because God starts talking about, we can't even, sometimes, brethren, I know when you're hurting, that's not much of an argument. But sometimes when we're feeling like, we could use some more information, just think about what we don't know about the world in which we live, and we spend our whole lives here. I'm always marveled at how much we don't know about the human body. We think we do. And then lo and behold, something like COVID comes around, and we're like, we don't have a clue. We don't know how this works. We think we do. We think we're so smart. We think we've got all these folks in the medical field, and everybody's doing this and doing that. And, George Washington wasn't that long ago, right? We're still a very, very fresh new country. You know what killed George Washington? He got an infection in his throat. Little thing keeps you, from swallowing and stuff. It got so infected that, and you know how they cured all diseases in his day and age? They bled you out, which is exactly what you don't need. You need all the blood you can get, to fight the infection, and that's just been the last couple hundred years. God can't put it in our finite mind, if you will, all that he knows. And, brother, sometimes we go through things and we don't realize how important it is to those round about us to see us go through those things. Job is going through what he's going through, and I know Job didn't know me, but I'm pretty sure Job went through that for me, so that I can go back, I can look at this book, and I can see the sufferings and the physical problems as well as the loss of life that he goes through, and how he handles that and does it so well. And you might say, well, he has some problems. Yes, he does, but he's a man. And I can see that, and I can appreciate that. And so, I've been around the Christians who passed. I've been around folks that weren't Christians in the past, and that's an influence on us. And the attitude that some of the brethren have, I'm going home. I'm done. I'm ready. I've spent my life preparing for this very moment. That's an example. And seeing folks go through some of the things they've gone through. What is it? Let's take a look at 2 Corinthians real quick. I don't know if you guys have your notes. But this is the passage that I find myself turning to a lot, particularly when I'm having trouble explaining something to myself. Notice the wrong chapter. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. This is 2 Corinthians 1, 3. The Father of mercies, the God of all comfort, who comforted us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. Why do we go through the things that we go through? Makes us stronger, makes us appreciate the things that are really, truly important. And it also puts us in a situation to be able to help other folks who are going through that very thing. A lot of times we don't even know it. We lived it. We've gone through it. I had a situation arise in my family in which I needed to talk to the elders, some indiscretions among my children. And I didn't know, I knew that the elders were required to have children. I knew they were to be family men and so forth. But I never appreciated it as much as I did when I went to my elders telling them, look, this has happened in my family. I want you guys to know, and how every one of them, to the man, had experienced things like that in their own families. And they had a whole perspective on that I wasn't prepared for. And instead of, lambasting me or telling me couldn't I done a better job as a father or anything. They just walk me through their lives and say, man, this is a part of life. You know, you can't control things that happen sometimes, and you know, so we go through things sometimes. Life-changing, gut-wrenching, can't even get off your knees for days because of the pain that you're experiencing, not physical, but emotional pain. And a lot of times you can use that later on in life to like, hey, you're not the only one that's traveled this path. It's not the end of the world. I know it feels like it is. I know it feels like everything you've done or everything you've tried is not work, but you're looking at that the wrong way. Use it as a tool. Use it as something to build on and to make you stronger. Notice at this deep point here, he says, at this point in the book, Job could not perceive the possibility God could afflict his faithful children for their own good. He came to see later that that's the very thing. Just like, you know, we're told about how we are purged, how we are purified like a precious metal in our lives. That doesn't come without pain. It doesn't come without things to make us stronger. You guys that have, anybody here that's done any kind of walking or exercising or any kind of athletics, or you push your body, and you push your body to the point of pain, sometimes absolute collapse. And why do you do that? Because as a result of that, you know what it feels like when you get there. What is that old Vince Lombardi said? Fatigue makes finishing. Nobody's a Green Bay Packers fan, huh? Okay. Fatigue makes cowards of us all. What's that mean? You get to a point where you're so tired, you just feel like you can't do nothing about it. That's why he said you got to push through it. You got to be hard. That's why you push your athletes. As a coach, I push my athletes hard. Get them into a point where they were having muscle breakdown, and then put them in the batter's box. You're going to get tired in the ninth inning. You're going to get tired, you know, you at your fourth game of the day. You've got to learn the proper techniques and so forth so that when you are stressed, that you're still doing the right thing. But that's why it's important that we as Christians prepare ourselves in the peaceful times. That we have a good spiritual life, both not only studying our Bibles, but our prayer life. And we have that is always there. And then when the goings get rough, guess what? It's not a new thing for us. We've been there. We've walked this walk. We're not going to stop reading now. We're not going to stop studying. We're not going to stop praying. As a matter of fact, we may even double down on it, but it's not new to us. It's not something that we haven't been through before. That's why I try to encourage people incorporate God into the mundane things of your life, because most of your life is what? It's mundane. Get up in the morning, brushing your hair, and brushing your teeth. Which y'all might look at me, that's a lot easier now than it used to be. You know? Oh, let's look at what he says here. Job's confusion. And I'm back in 1 Corinthians again. We're in Job 10, right? Hey, y'all help me keep up with time too, all right? But I'll let it go. Job 10, let's look at verse 14. If I sin, then thou markest me, and thou wilt not acquit me from mine iniquity. If I be wicked, woe unto me, and if I be righteous, yet will I not lift up my head. I am full of confusion. He said, I don't really know how to handle this. I'm seeming to be being punished for trying to be right. So B there, he is confused. He knew in his heart he tried to follow God the best he could. He knew his life, and he was not conscious of anything he had done to be marked as a sinner. And so, you know, he's in a bad way, isn't he? I mean, he's having to deal with, why is God doing this? You know, why am I in this situation with God? And yet he's also got his friends. He's kind of like in a bad sandwich here, isn't he? God on one side, his friends on the other side, and it seems like everybody's attacking him. And, you know, he doesn't really... You know, the thing that's always got me about this book is that God doesn't bother to tell him. You know, when it's all said and done, God just never comes out and says, you know, this is all about Satan. I was just really running interference for you, trying to keep you alive. So he didn't explain that to him. He just helps Job see where he's supposed to be in life. And that is, you just trust me, God says. And I'll take care of it. And boy, that says a lot for us, doesn't it? Just trust God, He's got it. Put our life in His hands. It says at point 2 there, it says, it seems Job spoke of the intensification of his afflictions. It's getting worse, right? His physical malady had certainly not improved, and we learned Satan did not strike and then go away. He continues, talking about how Job sleeps at night. You know, and it may be the case that the devil's got something to do with his sleeping patterns. I do not know. But how well do you sleep when you're going through stress? You find yourself waking up, you find yourself anxious, you find yourself just with more energy than you know what to do with. And rather that's, you know, I know this is a little off topic here, but man alive, do we need to be careful about being anxious about things? Miss G, you would not believe how much time that I have spent in my life worrying about things that never came to pass. Yeah. It just didn't even happen. Yeah. What am I going to say if he says this? What am I going to do if they say that? Well, what about if this happens or if that happens? And you know what? None of it happened. And I had to take I didn't have to. For some reason I volunteered like an idiot. I was coaching a 10 and under travel team, softball. And I decided, for some odd reason, that it'd be great if we all went to Disney World and played in the Disney World tournament. And trying to put all that together and everything, I about gave myself a heart attack. I thought I was dying. We was on the way to Florida. I pulled the car over and said, Spenny, I think I'm going to have to go to the hospital. And she's going like, what's wrong? And she'd take my pulse, and so sure enough, my heart was jumping around, you know, and stuff. And bottom line, it was me. It was all in my head. I had stressed myself to the point I didn't even realize it. You know, for what? Did it really matter if we went down there and flopped? You know what I mean? We didn't win the tournament by any means, but you can get yourself so worked up over stuff that just doesn't mean anything. And I think all of us have been there. We don't sleep well. Job is not going to be sleeping well. And here in chapter 11, we're going to see that his buddy Zophar accuses Job of lying. How many of us like liars? No, right. You know, I'd rather have a politician steal my wallet than lie to me. You know, I get so tired of lying. I don't like liars. I'm not. And see, here I am. What's confession is good for the soul. I was very naive as a parent. And I had a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, that boy that lives over in this house over here, his granddad. We were talking one time, and I was telling him about how one of my children just wasn't being truthful with me. We were homeschooled. And he would tell me he had done something, and lo and behold, he hadn't. And I was like, I just can't understand it. And I'll never forget, Reggie said, well, you know, Ron, it is the nature of children to lie. You'd think, me being a grown man, you know, I would have remembered that, but I sure didn't. And, you know, kids don't want to get in trouble, so they'll have a tendency to, well, for a better word, they just lie. Stretch the truth. Don't tell you the truth. And so, I didn't appreciate that. And why I try to tell my kids, listen, I don't care what you've done, but just be honest with me. That puts me in a position to be able to help you. If I'm ignorant of it, you know, and then lo and behold, it happens, and you know what? It didn't work. They still have found themselves in situations that needed to have come to me much earlier than they did. It's just, but I'm trying to encourage them, don't lie. You know what's got me is I've had my children say, well, that's not right, you're lying to us. And I'm like, I've never lied to you in your entire life. I'd rather die than lie to you. I'm not going to do that. I think that much of that. Boy, if you know, if there's just a few things in this world, if you can be held to your word, I mean, isn't that what a Christian should be? And yet I am amazed at how many stories, how many times I have found where brethren were simply just telling a bald-faced lie. And that's discouraging, isn't it? To think that brethren don't hold the truth. And, well, what do you think about Job here? Here's a guy who we know is as conscientious as everything. He really cares about lying, not lying, being right. And so Zophar, notice what he says to him. Let's go ahead and read these. Let's just go ahead and read these first verses. Then answered Zophar the Naamathite and said, should not the multitude of words be answered? And should a man full of talk be justified? Should thy lies make men hold their peace? And when thou mockest, shall no man make thee ashamed. You know what I've done now, brethren? I do it. It's a standard policy with me now. When somebody comes to me and says something, I'm talking about something significant, I say, is that right? I'll get my phone out and I say, let's call them. And you know what? Generally, that's where it will end. But there have been a couple times I went ahead and made that call because they've been accusing my family or accusing my wife, or I said, well, let's just call them. And by the way, who told you that? Because as soon as we get on the phone with her, we need to call them. And you know what? Most of the time, that nips it in the bud. Because people love to argue and talk about what they heard somebody else say, but when it comes to, let's bring them in, let's see what they said. Generally, that, you know, we'll handle things like it. Doesn't that sound almost like something you read in the Bible? Yeah, you know, like yeah, 18, isn't it? Yeah. And yet, brethren, we sometimes, well, a lot of times do not follow those policies, and we can fix so much of what's wrong. Well, here he's just basically saying, should we just sit here and listen to you and not tell you? Shall no man make thee ashamed? For how thou hast said, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in thine eyes. Is Job lying about that? Of course he is not. It's only he's just bald-faced telling them that. Notice point number 2 there. He says, Eliphaz began the speeches in a much warmer spirit than the other two, and even than his own later speeches. So the heat's going to be turned up. And Job's response to Eliphaz's speech received a resentful and annoyed reply from Eliphaz and Job. He describes Job's speech as merely a multitude of words, a speech more like that of a fool than a man of Job's stature. Wow. Notice Solomon's words. Y'all have those in your notes, Ecclesiastes 5:3. This is chapter 11, subpoint 2, subpoint E. Y'all have that? Okay, check it out. Compared to Solomon's words, for a dream cometh through the multitude of business, and the fool's voice is known by the multitude of words. Have you ever noticed how sometimes people are considered wise just because they don't say much? What's that, Brother So-and-so? You know, what's that tell us? A lot of times we can just be quiet and up our game, couldn't we? Ecclesiastes 5, verse 3. Determined that Job is a liar, Zophar takes it upon himself to give his friends a stern rebuke, and gets after him, that he has mocked God with his boastful and empty and lying words. That had to just be so painful for a man who loves God and wants to be what God would have him to be, to have your friends tell you that you're mocking God. Notice point 4 there, Zophar stated correctly, God is beyond human comprehension. No mortal can completely grasp the fullness of God. Brother, that's the thing that we have to remember. God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. As my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, as the earth is higher than the heavens is higher than the earth. We need to remember that. And so when we're going through these different things, and we can't figure out any reason in the world why this is taking place, remember that God knows all and sees all. What's happening to you may very well be the answer to somebody else's problems later on. There may be multiples of people's problems. And can you think of Job, what Job would think now if he could look ahead, see us, and, you know, outskirts of Cleveland, Tennessee, 2003, 3,500 years later, maybe farther, talking about his life and the difficulties that he went through, and how he could see how all that stuff that he went through was actually helping comfort people for thousands of years in the future. That might have made it a little easier to swallow, mightn't it? Well, Zophar calls for Job's repentance. Notice verse 13. If thou prepare thine heart and stretch out thine own hands toward him, if iniquity be in thine hand, put it far away. What's he telling him? Repent. Repent. For then, verse 15, shalt thou lift up thy face without spot. Yea, thou shalt be steadfast and shalt not fear, because thou shalt forget thy misery and remember it as waters that pass by. What's he telling him? Get right with God. And the whole thing that Job has been trying to tell him is, I haven't done anything that I can think of that would put me in a position to not be right with God. Tells him, let not sin dwell in thine house. Well, Zophar's mind, the stain of the multitude of sins, was on Job's soul, S-O-U-L. And, of course, Job, What's he doing? He's assuming that Job is guilty. All these friends are doing that. And they're going to have to answer for that later on. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at chapter 12 there. Job rejects the word of his friends, verses 1 through 6. Let's go ahead and read all 6 verses. Job answered and said, no doubt ye are the people, and wisdom shall die with you. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, when somebody's all that, you know. I say like, boy, we're going to be in trouble when you're not around, you know, because when you go, there goes all knowledge. He says, but I have understanding as well as you. I'm not inferior to you, yea, who knoweth not such things as these? I am as one mocked of his neighbor, who calleth upon God, and he answereth him. The just upright man is laughed to scorn. He that is ready to slip with his feet is as a lamb despised in the thought of him that is at ease. The tabernacles of robbers prosper, and they that provoke God are secure, and those into whose hands God bringeth abundantly. What's he saying? He's saying what so many of us have said before. The psalmist that talks about, you know, with the Psalm 73, I would almost slipped, I'd almost fallen away when I saw how well the wicked prosper, right? It seems like the evil get rewarded and the good get punished. And brethren, is that the case? Now it may seem that way on the outside, but do wicked people have problems? Well, yeah. You know, a lot of times they've got problems that you and I don't have to fool with. It's been a long, long time since I've had to worry about waking up with a hangover, or where I'm going to get a fix with dope, or anything like that. Christians, there's a lot of things that we think, look how successful they are. Look at that big fine car. And you don't realize the struggle they're going through to pay for all those things, and the drug addictions and the extramarital affairs and all that stuff that we don't have to worry about. And so a lot of times when we think, you know, the wicked are really doing good, and you know, the good folks are not doing so well, it comes from limited knowledge. And anybody that's what do most people, we talked about it a while ago, it's on the front of a building, what do we call that? A facade. Most people are going to try to put on a good show regardless of what's going on inside. And just because we see it, we're told that. And man, if you look on who are the happiest, most go-lucky people in all of society right now if you watch television? Who would that be?
Hollywood.
Well, Hollywood, but what particular group right now seems to be just having a heyday?
LGBT.
What's that?
LGBTQ.
There you are with all them letters, man. I think that means homosexuals. But yeah, I mean, if you want to have a good time, you need to be gay. If you want to get promoted, you need to be gay. If you want to be in a movie, you need to be gay. And it's that shame that we've given that word up. It's kind of like, I'm glad to see a lot of folks taking the rainbow back, but, you know, we're sold that. We are sold that. Is that true? No, it's not true. What do homosexual people want? Well, I'm not sure. To be honest with you, they want to be told they're normal and that's, you know, perfectly fine, normal behavior. But it is anything but. Very nature itself screams and cries out against that. And we can try to cover it up. We can try to paint it. We can try to take real pretty pictures of it. But it's still a very violent form of life. It's a very perverted form of life. It just is not going to be able to work with children and so forth. And it's just not a good thing. And yet, well, there we are. We have that facade we're trying to do and make something that's not. Job, notice in point 2 here, Job stated he possessed a measure of wisdom as well as they. Notice it was commonly believed that those who suffered did so because of sin, but frequently that's not true. My wife works in what's called a NICU, an neonatal intensive care unit. And a lot of babies are up there, and if you're in her department, usually you're pretty jacked up. You know, it's something went wrong somewhere, or something DNA, or some biological process didn't finish, or something, and so, and you see those children, and they didn't do anything. They haven't done anything now their parents may have. You know, it's not uncommon for those children to have sexually transmitted diseases, knowing they've never even experienced such. It's not uncommon to find them addicted to drugs, which, by the way, they have to give them morphine and heavy opioids to bring them off the drugs that they're on, and so they're going through this, but they didn't deserve that. And so this idea that sinners are paying for their sins, or that bad things happening, you know, indeed sinful choices bring about suffering, but sometimes good choices still bring around bad things. I mean, you know, have you ever seen those people who exercise religiously, they eat good, and they're dead at 42? You know, and I'm going, boy, I haven't ate good my entire life, and boy, exercise is something I really need to do a whole lot more of, and here I am almost 59. It almost doesn't seem fair sometimes. Sometimes it's not all about the decisions that you make. We want to make good decisions, we'll be good stewards, but we still see sometimes that doesn't result in what we think it should. So notice subpoint B there, he had regularly prayed to God and had been answered, and he knew from personal knowledge that he walked with God. Now verse 5 says, Rick says here in the notes, it's difficult to put on a concise statement. However, the idea is one who will not take advantage of an available light is sure to slip. And, you know, if you travel down a dark path, then you're bound to slip. But sometimes you slip anyway. Notice subpoint B, I believe y'all have this one, is in the context, Job directs his statement to his friends. They assume Job was guilty of having sin in his life, but that he's costing them. Their blind assumption is setting them up for a fall. Job also points out two reasons why their assumptions are wrong. He says because sometimes robbers get away with it, right? And why do some who actually shake their fists at God, why do they live in security? So he says, you see exceptions to this rule that you're trying to hang over my head. Notice nature testifies of God's wisdom. Let's look at verse 7 through 12. But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee. Fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee. Speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee. Fish of the sea shall declare it unto thee. Who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this? In whose hand is the soul of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind? Do not the ear try words, and the mouth taste his meat? Verse 12. With the ancientest wisdom and the length of days, understanding. It just means if we go through the process of time, we'll come to learn things by just watching them repeatedly over and over, and we can learn to appreciate these things. We see it in nature. Sometimes things don't work out like you thought they might, and then sometimes things work out great when you thought that maybe it wasn't going to turn out so well. And then he talks about the wisdom of God. Let's look at let's see. Just sometimes, you know, the way you think something ought to go, it doesn't go. Look at verse 17. He leadeth counselors away spoiled, and maketh the judges fools. Sometimes the way that we think things ought to go, it just doesn't happen. And who's in charge of that? Well, Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. If you don't have those, do you have those in your notes, subpoint B? Write that in if you don't. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. My thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways not your ways. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts than your thoughts. God created, he alone can destroy. You know, that is something amazing, and I think we get on to that a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and mention it because I've always found it pretty interesting. And that is that you can't create or destroy. What's that, man?
Oh, sorry, I was asking for the repeat of that verse.
Isaiah 55, 8, 9, I believe it was.
Yes.
And that is, do you realize you cannot create matter nor destroy matter? And you might say, well, I don't think that's right. I mean, I've destroyed a whole lot of stuff since I've been around. Hey, you know, I've burnt a lot of wood. I've had wood piles 6 feet high and 18 feet long coming in. The some of them are all gone. Well, they've changed, but are they all gone? No, you got ash. You've got stuff floating around in the air. You know, brother, one of the things, we'll stop here. One of the things that always stuck with me is that we're drinking the same water that Abraham drank. drinking the same water that Noah was floating around in. There hasn't been any new water created. It's been filtered, it's been changed, it's gone up and you know, isn't that amazing? People that don't think there's a God in heaven, first of all, look at the other places they've gotten their water, all these other planets everybody wants to live on. But think about how much water is out there floating in the atmosphere. I mean, you could get trailer load after trailer load, truckload after truckload. You're never gonna be able to move that much tonnage of water to be able to, you know, supply the whole United States with rain to grow the crops, and yet God does that every day. You know, as water evaporates, goes up into the clouds come over, and I wish they'd quit coming over our house so much. We're good on water for a while, but you know what? You are good on water till you're not. Then all of a sudden, you're like, well, I wish we'd get some of that water, you know? That's why, you know, God didn't leave me in charge of the weather, because it would look like Arizona outside. It would just be, I don't like rain, but I tell you what, I do like green, so they kind of go together. Brethren, I've enjoyed it. It's good to see you again. They haven't let me back out here ever since I got arrested last time I was up here. I don't know they're holding that against me. I don't know what that is, but it has indeed been good to be with you. See you. We've all aged a little